I can't describe to you how that feels, but I started to shake. I mean, my heart's racing. I can't hardly hold up the phone because I knew something really, really bad had happened to my son.
My brother died a little over 11 years ago.
First found out, got a call from a friend of one of the kids that was with Brian that night. And they said that they think there's been an accident. We think Brian's been in the accident.
I just felt completely numb. I just saw him 4 hours ago. How could he possibly be dead?
You can do two things with grief. I mean, you can let it consume you and downward spiral your life, or you can do something positive with it.
Ever since Brian's death, is if we can just help one person, think about how much of an impact that has.
You can look at death as a tremendous negative, which of course it can feel like that. But when you explore it more deeply, it shifts your perspective on the way you live your life. All right, guys. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining the podcast, both of you. This is exciting. I haven't done a conversation like this before with the father and son, so I'm really looking forward to it. And to get started, would you guys mind introducing yourselves, just for anyone that might not know either of you, and we can get the ball rolling from there?
All right. Less people will probably know me, but I'm Kevin Hefflinger. I'm 26 years old. I work in finance and venture capital, and I've been doing social media with my dad for about 18 months, who a lot of people will probably recognize.
And I'm Brian Hefflinger. I'm a neurosurgeon by trade. So I've been a neurosurgeon for about 25 years now out of residency. And I live in Toledo, Ohio. And Kevin and I started doing some social media stuff about 18 months ago. And it's just really grown more than what we ever thought it would be. So,
but yeah, we talk about, his life as a neurosurgeon and then our life kind of as a family. And my brother died a little over 11 years ago. And we've just tried to raise awareness around drunk driving and prevention thereof and just other things like that.
Yeah. Very passionate about that. Yep.
Well, I appreciate you guys being willing to talk about that. It's something that is so known when it comes to drunk driving, but at the same time, I feel like it's still not discussed in an intimate level that we're about to talk about it. So again, I want to thank you guys for being willing to talk about something so intimately as a family. And as I mentioned on this podcast before, I'm really excited to talk to you both because I think the family dynamic is so important when it comes to anything that a family may go through, let alone, the topic of grief that we're going to discuss because of the different facets on how either of you may have experienced it. So do either of you want to take it from the top of, what happened to your son and brother that day or night when it happened, so we can kind of start the story from where it begins?
Yeah, so you cut me off if I get too wordy. I mean, I'll give you an overview and I can get to the point where Kevin can get involved in how it affected him that night. But so the night my son died, he went to a party after a basketball game for a birthday party, and everyone was drinking at a parent's house down in the basement. And then somehow, he got out of that party drunk, got his keys, got in the car, and he hit a tree head on at high speed about midnight, about a mile away from our house. So I was the neurosurgeon on call for a couple hospitals, level 1 trauma hospitals in the city. And when we first found out, got a call from a friend of one of the kids that was with Brian that night. And they said that they think there's been an accident. We think Brian's been in the accident. So, it's like 12:30 in the morning and Cindy and I are just, I don't know what to even think, but they said, you need to call St. Anne's Hospital, which is like a low level trauma hospital. So I figured if Brian went there, he probably broke his leg or something, And so I called the hospital and I said, this Dr. Hefflinger is my son, Brian, there. And, there's a big pause right away and they don't answer my question, which is odd because they all know me. And I said, well, is my son Brian there? And they said, well, he's not here anymore. They transferred him to Toledo Hospital. So Toledo Hospital is a level 1 trauma center for major trauma. And so I knew something really horrible had happened for them to transfer Brian from this hospital to Toledo Hospital. And I can't describe to you how that feels, but I started to shake. I mean, my heart's racing. I can't hardly hold up the phone because I knew something really, really bad had happened to my son. And it's that feeling of permanency. I knew something bad had happened and it's done. You can't change it. So I called Toledo Hospital and everybody knows me there. And I said, this is Dr. Hefflinger, is my son Brian there. And again, you get this big long pause and nobody will talk. I said, for God's sake, I said, it's Dr. Hefflinger. You tell me what the hell is going on with my son. And they said, you just need to come to the hospital right now, And so I could tell Brian was dead because for them not to tell me what's going on with him, I figured he was dead. And I talked to my wife and I said, he's probably dead, Cindy, but, we drove in, it was a cold, snowy night. And I went in the back entrance and Dr. Judd, who's the trauma attending there, we're friends with him. He was waiting for us outside and, we got out and he immediately said, Brian's dead. And, you know, uh, he gave Cindy a big hug and they were just crying a bit. And so he took us back to where Brian was. And that's probably the most surreal thing that you'll ever want to feel. And I can't describe it in words, but to see your son lying there just in this dark room on a gurney, pale white, looks like he's just sleeping, but he wasn't asleep. We knew he was dead. And, we just stood there and you don't even know what to think or feel. And I mean, Cindy walked up to him and looked at him. She's a forensic pathologist, my wife, so she wanted to examine him. I didn't really want to see what had happened to him because it was such a horrible accident. But, she touched him and she said he's cold. And I said, of course he's cold. Cindy's dead. But it's like we're these two doctors looking at our son, but we're parents too. And it's just an odd thing. And so then we knew we had to do something, how are we going to tell our kids? Because we had the kids at home. Somebody came over and watched them. And we came home and I gathered the kids and I said, your brother Brian has been in a bad accident and he's dead. And then maybe I let Kevin take it from there because that's probably how he remembers me saying that, what he felt about it.
Well, I just remember, you probably do too. Christy, my youngest, I was 15. So Brian was 18. He was a senior in high school. I was 15. I was a freshman. Julie was 14 and then Christy was 11. Christy, I don't think she understood at all, but she just started yelling at the top of her lungs like my dad was lying to her. I remember I had just seen my brother. I played in the junior varsity basketball game, and then I saw him during the varsity game. We were both in the stands. The last thing I talked to him was about the dance tomorrow and if he was having people over at our house. And I just remember feeling we knew I came home from my friend's house. So I thought the same thing. Like I thought Brian just got in an act, like something seemed up and you just think it's a small thing. And it doesn't, you were very sheltered from death in society. If you're not, like a first responder, cop in the military or a doctor, I just feel like you never experienced it. You've seen it in TV shows. But then, Brian, I just felt completely numb because all I could think about is my older brother who I'm very close with. Like I just saw him 4 hours ago. How could he possibly be dead? And, my entire life just flashed, like all the things I thought me and Brian were going to do together in life as brothers. It just vanished. And then, like my dad said, when we went to the hospital, Brian, his entire, he was covered up to a sheet, just his face was showing. His hair, he had his hair gelled and his face looked normal. Obviously he was pale, but he looked normal. It did look like he was somewhat sleepy. But obviously under that he was all mangled. But it's just the permanence of actually then seeing him dead in a hospital room. Like, he's actually dead. You want to think, right? You had already seen him, but the entire car ride there, I was just thinking, maybe there was a mistake, maybe something, maybe you think maybe there's a chance. But then when you see your brother dead, then you are in a hospital room. It's over.
Yeah, it's what strikes you the most is people talk about a hole in their heart and that kind of stuff. It's true because it's like a part of you gets ripped away that you'll never. Because when somebody dies, it's like you've lost your future, right? All the things that we thought Brian would do and life we'd have with him and getting married and having kids, it's all gone. So someone tears a part of your future away from you. You can never get that back. And that's where then you start a whole new life without him, So it's a different life. Your life is all of a sudden you've gone down this timeline and all of a sudden your whole life is different in a moment in time from this happening, and it's changed all our lives,
For exclusive access to bonus content, new episodes, and more, check out our Patreon account for only $5 a month. Link is in the description. Yeah, that's the thing. When you think about grief and just losing someone, obviously, it's the pain of just not having that person and as a general blanket statement, but it is that grief is the grieving of the future, of just a life that you expected to have, especially when you lose someone so young. There's just such a difference and not to minimize anyone that loses someone later down the line, but at the same time, he was so young. And especially as a parent to have a child pass before you do, I witnessed it with my grandmother losing her son and my dad. It's just, again, I witnessed it, didn't experience it. It's something, I don't have that.
Well, and some people don't make it through it. They don't. I remember Cindy and I, we were told to go to a counselor, right? And we went to a counselor like 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, and it was one visit, and that was over with because he said you're going to go through this dark tunnel, and 6 months later you'll come out of it, and 85% of people end up getting divorced. And I said, I don't need all this negativity, whether it's reality or not. But my wife and I worked our way through it with our family, and we're stronger than ever, and have done a lot of good things with it. But a lot of it is a mindset. But I don't listen to other people trying to tell me the way I should grieve and what I should expect and how I should do it. I mean, that,
I know. I think
it was
I
really
think the two, like the 5 stages of grief and everything are. I think that everything's good to have guidelines, but I think whenever after you've lost someone, I think there's a huge thing whenever you meet people, you connect with someone on a deeper level, or when other people have lost someone. Because I know what it was like to go through. It's just everything's going to be, you have to experience it yourself. And that's something as a family we learned is you all kind of, it's such a different experience for each person. And then as you mature and you grow, like part of it is trying to, what we've done as family is experience what they felt, trying to understand what they were feeling while we were feeling that, and how we all got through in our own unique ways, I think.
Because I'm sure a lot of people listening to this right now who have been through a death, you'll notice that you're alone, right? I mean, my wife felt alone. I felt alone. Kevin felt alone. We're all in the same house, but we're all alone because it's that feeling of loneliness. For me, it was, and I think a lot of us it was, that you don't feel connected to anything at that moment. And then there's the things that go through my wife. I mean, if she didn't have, and I thought the same thing. I mean, if we didn't have other kids, we probably would have committed suicide. I mean, I know my wife thought about it because it's such a overwhelming feeling of loss and grief, and how am I going to survive the rest of my life? And nothing else matters. It's just yourself and what you've lost, and you forget about everything else. And it takes a little bit of time to get to grips with that and get over that feeling. But I can see why people, don't survive this.
You really, and I would always say too, whenever we talk about this, if you're ever feeling completely down, please reach out to someone, reach out to a hotline, reach out to family, reach out to friends. But I think such a huge thing is just that. I remember sitting through classes, and everything felt like when I was in high school class, I would sit through there and I would see people like laughing, joking, or learning. I would just be sitting there completely checked out. Like at times, especially those first couple months after Brian died, it just felt so like nothing mattered really to me. Like it was life. There was experiences of dullness. It'd be really hard to get through some moments. You really do. You have to take it, especially the first year, just one day at a time, because it's impossible to think about longer term.
I mean, I literally couldn't, when I would drive the car in the first month, I couldn't even turn the radio on. I love listening to the radio, and I couldn't turn it on because I'm just thinking Brian never has the chance to even listen to a radio again. I just couldn't do it. Or I'd be at work. I went back to work in a limited capacity 2 weeks after he died, and I had to be home by noon. Like I could not be gone for more than 4 or 5 hours, and I just had this homing beacon that I had to come home. I just couldn't be there anymore. I mean, it takes a long time to get over those feelings, to get back to any normalcy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in there that I kind of want to touch upon. I mean, Kevin, you mentioned in regards to, actually, I mean, both of you kind of did, but in regards to, Brian, what you said about the idea of loneliness, it is interesting because it seems like you guys have a great support system amongst your family, and I can relate to that in my own way in regards to having my sisters and a lot of people around me to help me get through it. And I give a lot of credit to my support system for me even getting through it. But at the same time, it is kind of ironic that even if you have that support system, there is that idea of loneliness because like Kevin said, everyone grieves differently. There is an individuality to everyone's experience because of the different relationships, brother, father, timing of everything. So even if you have the support, you can easily feel isolated. And then also to what Kevin said in regards to, how everyone grieves differently, and there should be a guideline. Like it is important to see guidelines when you see these grief books and this podcast or whatever. I'm kind of with the school of thought of, I like the method of hearing stories like you guys, because you can kind of pick what you want and what you relate to and what you don't. And so even though I understand, you might not like the idea of someone telling you what you should or shouldn't feel. I think maybe it should be presented different. And like you could expect this might happen, this happens, but also like it's going to be your unique experience. So take and recognize what feels right with you. But at the same time, we're just kind of freestyling it. It's like you can read it, you could listen to this podcast all day before it happens, but until like Mike Tyson said, until it punches you in the face, you're not going to know how your body reacts. And it's just one of those things that is you just roll through it.
And maybe, I didn't mean to say that. I mean, maybe we hit the wrong counselor. Maybe it's somebody who just doesn't click with us, and we didn't like his approach, I guess, and it really turned us off of the whole thing. So
what was the approach? I apologize for cutting you off, but do you recall what kind of approach he was suggesting?
Well, no, he was just kind of laying out how it's going to be for us, like to tell us this is what you're going to go through. This is what happens. Most people end up divorced. But there really wasn't any tools for us. He's kind of telling us what we're going to go through and giving us these horrible expectations, but not really giving us any tools about what you should do. I don't know. It was a bad experience.
I think it really depends. Maybe it was the wrong time.
Yeah,
and also, I mean, different things work for different people.
Right. And some people may benefit from that greatly.
No, I love that. I mean, I love the fact of how you had the cognizance to know that, because I feel like a lot of people can easily hear that those numbers, those stats, or those expectations, and kind of lean into it. So it's impressive. Obviously, you guys are smart dudes, but at the same time, especially in a vulnerable situation, it's, first of all, that's a weird way to put things, like so negative off the rip. That's incredible. But the fact that you made that decision, and what I'm getting at is, as a family and going through an experience like you guys have, that mental state and the perspective and the attitude that you have to get through it is so important. So it seems like right off the rip, Brian and Kevin, you guys both took a different approach of that positivity and getting through it. So what was that in such a dark time? How are you able to stay positive on both sides? Like Brian, and then you alluded to, you have your kids, so that was a big driving force to keep moving forward. But was there anything else that kind of pushed you guys towards that positivity?
Well, a couple things from my perspective. So number one was I wrote in the book that I did that you have to show. I mean, we had to set an example for our kids. I mean, this is a life altering thing for them more than anybody. And, you have to set somebody an example. Like, my wife had to carry on and take care of them and show them that life goes on. And I went back to work and showed them that life goes on. You can't just sit at home in the dark and start drinking. For me, I couldn't. And I needed to show my kids that there's more, that life does go on, and you have to get over this the best you can. But then also, so Brian was the drunk driver. He obviously was the drunk driver, and thank God he didn't kill anybody. And we thank that over and over every day. But, the news caught wind of his alcohol level when the autopsy was done, and they portrayed it very badly in the news. And I'm a neurosurgeon. My wife's a doctor, and it was very scandalous how they presented it. And so, I took that on. I wasn't going to let them. My son was a great kid. He made a good kid that made a bad decision, as do a lot of kids. And I wasn't going to let them tarnish and make him look like he was this raging alcoholic drunk who was out to kill somebody. And so that's when this all started, that we went to the news and we said, we want to bury our son first, but then we want to talk about this. And we had a news station come over, and that's how this all started, about advocates against drunk driving. We came right out and admitted it. Our son was drunk and he was driving and made a horrible decision, but there's no reason that we can't learn from this and try to help other people not make that decision, help parents with this, help kids. And that's how it all started. And it's just, and then, as a family, we've grown with this, and Kevin's older now. He does this with us, and we give talks, and we have a talk coming up this Thursday at a high school. And
I think it gives you a mission, a purpose.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things, there's just some things that what's so crazy is drunk driving for so long now, probably since cars have been around. I mean, it's a senseless death, and it affects so many people, but on both sides, people who are hit by drunk drivers and drunk drivers who harm themselves, and all the ripple effects of the people around you. It's completely preventable. And so you almost, when something like that happens, I think you need to channel that energy in a way. So I think we've talked about this before, but I think if you don't try to channel it towards something like that, advocacy, you channel it into darker things like, getting drugs, alcohol, or self-destructive behaviors. So because there's just an energy force within you that I think needs to go towards something. And I mean, I think similar to my dad, what I would constantly think about is, I was the second oldest. When Brian died, I always, a big thing, I didn't really show a lot of emotion to people that first year or two. I always was thought I needed to be strong for everyone else. I was the oldest child now, and I thought that everyone else, I know everyone's hurting. I thought, adding more to that, because I just always, I don't know, I think it's just being a male that age, but I just thought I could shoulder stuff, and I thought I could power through things. I mean, I learned later on, talking about things is a huge help and working through things. But that was just at the time when I was 15 or 16. So I would just do things like that. And something that's always worked ever since the start is my friends who knew Brian and Brian's friends. I'm just all in my family. I think my mom, a huge thing for her too. It's just talking about Brian. It's therapeutic. I never wanted it's painful. It brings up painful memories, but just talking about Brian always keeps his memory alive to me. It's the experiences we did get to have in this life together. So that was always helpful.
Kevin, I can't say I exactly relate, but you're giving me similarity vibes of, my dad died, I was 12. So it's, a different experience, of course, inherently with loss. But I feel like, there's that added pressure as all of a sudden stepping up now that you're the oldest child out of nowhere, and something that you wouldn't ever expect to happen. And then with my feelings, I became the quote unquote man of the house at 12 years old. So there was always for me this added pressure that wasn't there, didn't exist. My family never put it on me. I think someone made a comment along the family, like the man, I don't know, it just always stuck with me. I don't know if I literally made that up, or I'm pretty sure someone said that to me, but not in a bad way. But that innate pressure, like I'm the man, I'm the literal only boy at this time in the house, but I would be the only man in the house. And now you're the oldest child, which has that perspective of the oldest child. So you did feel that pressure? Or was that a pressure that, if it was a pressure, for lack of better terms, that's something you just created in your head, like you mentioned, or is that something to work through or still feel?
Similar to what you're saying is, yeah, it's not like anyone explicitly says that, or someone might say like a joking comment, or what I'm saying, or someone just a by comment, they mean nothing by it, like, oh, you're the man of the house now. But yeah, I think 100% you feel that pressure to an extent, like I'm the oldest child. And I also felt a lot of pressure, and still do. It's not necessarily like pressure is a bad thing. I still always have felt and still do feel pressure that Brian and my dad does too. Brian no longer gets to live. He's frozen in time at 18. There's a pressure that I want to do great things like in his honor, and I want to do things that he wouldn't get to do. I don't want to waste. I still get to have the gift of life every day. I don't want it to go to waste necessarily, which I think that's
we both feel that way. Like, we've done a lot of things in our lives now that I would have never done if Brian wouldn't have died, both physically and mentally, and you just want to do things that he can't do anymore, and that makes you appreciate things a bit more, I think.
Yeah, no,
did you feel like that when your dad died at all? Or?
Yeah, it took me some time. I think a lot of my processes happened as I got older and realizing certain things and getting smarter emotionally and mentally, and just understanding life a little bit more. So you contemplate things. So yeah, I always think about the simple philosophical questions of, would I be in would I have moved across the country if my dad didn't die? Obviously I wouldn't have this podcast. So it's like there's so many different things, just the what ifs. And I was having a conversation with a friend last night about having these deep conversations, which I tend to gravitate towards. And we're both like, can we put on like mind-numbing TV and just not talk about something as intellectually, philosophically stimulating? Because you got to find like a borderline for some of these questions, right?
Yeah.
Do you think because of your dad's death, have you become more serious in life than you think you would have been?
Ooh, no, I don't know. We came from a pretty silly family, so part of me is like my dark humor that I have. I had brought it up on here before. Like, did it all just come from that experience, or was it blended because we have a humorous family / this experience, and just kind of blended into this hilarious snowball? I don't know, but I'm definitely not more serious. I think if anything, I tend to laugh at things like I always have, but probably more now. In a way, I have to be gentle around certain personalities, but I think it's a blend of both. I feel like I'm confident in my ability to find the lightness / humor in things respectfully. Sometimes not to my own respect, but I think I have the on-off switch, because I feel like when you go through such pain, you are able to witness both sides of the spectrum so vividly. Like, you've been to a certain place that is serious and dark, and then when you can get to the other side, it's like you get to see, you're kind of dipping your toes on both borders, and then you kind of learn to kind of teeter back and forth as need be, hopefully on one side more than the other.
I think if there was a platform for people, I think I was talking last night, we were out to dinner, my wife and I talked to some guy for an hour having conversations, but he was saying how no one ever wants to talk about death, and he brought up the conversation, and he knew my son had died. But I mean, people crave to talk about death. They just don't want to because they feel like it's taboo or it's not what we talk about in society. And so I think there is a place for people to, if they could feel more comfortable talking about death and their loved ones. I mean, it makes you feel so much better to just kind of get it out and talk about it and not make it sound like it's so, well, we need to forget about that. Okay.
Well,
I mean,
and
that person's gone now. Let's just forget about it. Let's not keep talking about it. You know, it's one of those things I think,
well, and sadness in general. I think the huge issue with all these things is that we all don't really know. It's just like people giving advice. Like, so when you were younger, like a teacher or someone in school, people are all trying to give advice, but like, if you haven't experienced it, it's kind of impossible to say anything. So we're all kind of just going around like people don't know we don't know how to deal with all these things. So, and that's why it should be talked about a lot more. And it should be, like you were saying earlier, like tools and having specific actions. But
yeah. I mean, look at you guys' example. I think you've had this experience, and you have flipped it into something that is I'm sure healing for you guys in your own personal way, and in a way that's honoring, your son and brother, and in a way that's helping other people to hopefully learn from his experience, and so they don't make a similar action. And you flipped it into something, and that's all stimulated from death, which has this tabooness. And again, that's why I have this Dead Talks podcast. It's just I'm not saying, again, you have to wake up, have a cup of coffee, let's talk about death, but the contemplation of it, even if you haven't experienced it, I think could have a tremendous effect in your life. And it does have this negative connotation to it because it's terribly painful and sad and unknown. And I'm sure there's an attached fear to the idea of what happens after and all those philosophical questions. But it's like, yeah, you can look at things kind of through like you did, Brian, with your own experience, the positive or the negative. You can look at death as a tremendous negative, which of course it can feel like that. But when you explore it more deeply, it shifts your perspective on the way you live your life. And it can have very positive, profound effects. And
but
again, sorry. No, please.
No, I was going to say that one thing I was thinking about the other night was, when Brian died, and so we were going through picking out his casket, and the funeral director's there and picking out his clothes that we're going to put in the casket and just try to contemplate that stuff. And I was just thinking, like, I would have gave up my status as a doctor, every penny I own, all my wealth, all the stuff that everybody thinks is so cool that I have. I would have given that up as a heartbeat and been a homeless person if Brian could be alive again. And you quickly realize it doesn't matter, right? Because I can give all that up. He's not coming back. So you quickly realize that all this stuff that we do, that I'm a neurosurgeon and my wife's a doctor, and that we live in a nice house and I have stature, all that bullshit doesn't matter because it doesn't bring Brian back. And so it changes your whole perspective on life. It just does. You find out what matters in life and what doesn't, maybe quicker than I would have if Brian would have never died. Maybe some of that, I don't think I was ever arrogant, but say if there was an arrogance about me or something, I mean, all that's gone because it doesn't matter anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. I'll go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, apologize. The internet, everyone's listening. The internet, it's harder to have these like in between conversations. So I apologize for that. But go on, Kevin, please.
No, I was going to say that's definitely 100% changed my perspective on life. Because like I think death is the ultimate equalizer of all these people. They want money and all these other things. You realize that just the relationship you have with those closest to you is so much more important. There's no price you can put on that. So it's funny it became so clear to me growing up at that age, and even now, so clear to me that these people that will chase money and status so hard, and they spend no time with their family or people they say they care about. I feel like you're missing the whole point of everything.
Amen. Yeah, and me personally, I feel like it took some time, I'm sure, but I feel like my reaction time or my response time, if you will, to when something crappy happens in my life is way more tolerable. And I like to think that's because of my experience of going through some things, and the loss of my father is it's taught me like when something that I've seen other people just completely, react to, maybe a little extreme in my opinion. But again, it's all relative, and just from my lens, I just like, oh, okay. Like even as little as like I've got stuff spilled on my new shoes. I've seen people freak out because of their new Jordans and Yeezys. They're like, oh my God, I just got these XYZ. And I think it's been multiple times. Someone pour something in my shoe. I'm like, oh, whatever, it's just a shoe. And they're even shocked on my not getting upset at that. As small of as an example that is, it's like, I mean, my dad died.
I relate to that so hard because that's something it took me. everything is so relative. I learned that. I went to Ohio State, and I learned that in college so much. One thing is when you've been through something and people know if you've been through something, people feel comfortable talking to you. They feel comfortable to talk about to you if they're depressed or something bad that happened or all these things. I just feel like it opens up. And I'm always okay with it. I always talk to people. But one thing I constantly learned is it's all relative. The pain that I feel on something, because my worst thing is losing Brian. Someone else, their worst thing that might have happened to them is failing a test in college. And to them, it feels like the end of the world, and it truly does. And I'll talk to other people who they just are like, that's stupid. But I'm also like, it's not stupid. It's all relative to how you are. So I 100% relate to you. Once you've experienced that, it's like, okay, it's not the end of the world if I got something spilled on my shoes. Like I can get a new pair of shoes or I can clean them up. It changes your thoughts on that completely.
It also makes you realize how many people, because they do, and once you've experienced something like this, people just come to you with their problems, and you realize everybody has a problem in their life.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's problem is the biggest thing to them, and so everybody's suffering. Yeah. Most people are to some extent. You just don't know it because they don't tell you about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as they say, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. So that's why I don't get upset when someone's responding or reacting to I think most people react. I think we all react to things, but I think the wisdom and experience is how you respond to it. Like, I think it's normal. I had another conversation with my buddy Jorge yesterday, and we were talking about reactions and responses. And I think those are two very specific things. I think for the rest of our lives, we'll always have instinctual reactions, but I think the wisdom and experience comes from the response and how shortly, like once you realize the awareness of the reaction, how you can shorten that time period of, okay, I'm upset for an hour, then maybe you'll start with, I'm only upset for 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And I think that comes with the experience. There's a big difference between responsiveness and reactions to how we do things. But again, back to people's having these reactions to something that may be so minuscule to one person, I think it is important to have that cognitive thought that I don't know what they've been like. Maybe that, like you said, Kevin, like that is the worst thing they've ever been through. As small as it may seem to me, it's all relative. So it's like we're so quick to judge. Oh, this person just lost their son, and this person didn't get into that college, and he's reacting like that. But like, okay, I mean, yes, on paper, I understand, but it's like you don't know what the hell they've been through. You don't know if that is the worst thing they've ever been through.
I think a huge thing is also I always see people like, it's so funny seeing people with like road rage or other things. Something I always think about, if something, there's this great thought, if someone cuts me off, like, or they do something terrible in traffic or just anywhere else, I'm just like, I have no idea. Maybe that person just received the worst news of their entire life. Or maybe that person that cut me off or is speeding, they could be speeding to the hospital because someone they know or love is dying. You know what I'm saying? If you can reframe problems, it can completely just melt away any harsh feelings. It's not always easy to do that, and I 100% don't. But I'm saying when I'm thinking logically, that I would. It's, to me, it's just a better way to live. Thinking, giving people the benefit of the doubt versus judging them in the other way. Because how many times have you accidentally been rude or projected your anger or sadness on someone else without meaning to, whether you were cognizant of it or not?
Yeah, maybe that person's rushing the hospital, maybe they're late, and option C, maybe they are just an asshole and a terrible driver. That's always a possibility too. But again, I think it all comes down to perspective and how we see things. I think it is it calms you down. Like whenever I'm running late and I'm getting this or that, I'm like, it's my fault. I left late. It's not because this person's driving slow in front of me. I chose to leave 10 minutes before my appointment. Okay. It's not because this person's driving slow and you're going to be late because of them. Anyway, that's a whole other rant. The one thing I did want to tap in with you guys is the father-son relationship. I just think that's a powerful dynamic, and it's an opportunity I haven't had to talk to a father and son that have experienced such losses you both have. For whoever wants to go first, but what have you guys noticed in your dynamic? And this is just from exploratory conversation, but is there anything you feel like you guys did really well in regards to your relationship through this process of grief from father to son and vice versa? And is there anything that you guys were perhaps disagreeable upon in this process?
I think from my perspective, I think we've probably grown closer later on. Like I was still full-time, I'm still a full-time neurosurgeon, but I was still really busy when Brian died, and Kevin went off to college, and I remember I wrote him a letter. I don't know if he still has it, because he left for college. He's the first one to go away to college, and I said, I'm so sorry, Kevin. I know Brian's died, and I haven't spent a lot of time with you, and now you're gone, and I wish I would have spent more time and been at more games and things like that. And I don't know if you still have the letter, but I think it was. But I think, he went to college, was gone a lot, didn't get to see him, and now kind of has come back full circle as kids get older. I think so now I think we're doing much more. We still butt heads because we're both think we know it all at times, and we get in these fights like they're stupid, but it happens frequently. But I think for the most part, we've tried to work together on a lot of things now. Brian's cause and social media, and I don't know that I think that's brought us closer together. And as time goes on, we're really trying to work as a team. It's a new experience. It's a new dynamic in our life because we're treating each other more as like equals or whatever you want to say.
I think part of there's a couple of things. So part one here is we're still a lot. I think when we weren't as close, like that's still probably like a much stronger relationship than a lot of people potentially might have. And then now I think our family dynamic, especially because losing someone like Brian, I think I think most people that know us, we're an extremely close family, and we do. I think me and my dad, part of the reason we butt heads is because we are similar. We're how we operate as humans, and part of it is just like me getting older. You become more of an adult. It's not the same relationship, right? Of like when I'm just like 15, you can tell me to do something. But me and my dad have been working together on stuff for over 5 years now. So I think that completely. I think when we would have a lot more conversations when there's stuff we're working on together versus just things we're doing.
And it's different. Like Kevin's very, he reads voraciously, journals, he meditates, stuff that I used to do a little bit, but I don't do as much of that now. And so he learns constantly stuff. And I'm just kind of like a neurosurgeon. I go to work every day, and I don't sit around at night reading constantly and learning as much as I should. So, we're at a different stage of our life. And so I think, he thinks I should know a lot of stuff that I really don't know. Cause he's learning all kind of new things that I'm not learning. Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to turn my mic off. You guys talk amongst yourselves. I'm just going to watch.
No, he's always coaching me about doing that.
But I think it is like I love the idea of lifelong learning, and there's just so many cool. I love trying to show my dad stuff. Like he knows how to use technology, but it's funny teaching him like point up the people at his office know point up like MRIs and stuff. That's not his forte. And there's stuff like with podcasting, like I'll show him some stuff. He's like, even today we were coming over here. He's like, yeah, I love listening to stuff. Like that's the power of podcasts and audiobooks. I'm like, just do that more. If like you're tired at night and you don't want to necessarily read something, he's like, why don't you just help me set that up on my phone? Which is cool because he does it a bunch. He just needs you to like some help. You know what I'm saying? Just like the person with the podcast. If you set him up with all the stuff, then he knows how to do it. He'll do it a lot.
But what he doesn't realize, and it's true, my wife reminds me this my whole life, is that I'm privileged. I have people wait on me. When I'm in the operating room, people wait on me. I just ask for things and it's there. When I'm in the office, my people in the office, they do everything for me. So I have to do very little for myself. And so I don't know how to do a lot of computer stuff and all this stuff because I've never had to do it. People do it for me. And whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But I focus my efforts on things that I need to do and take care of patients and operate. And, but I don't focus on all the other stuff. So, I have people do that for me. And I always have. And so that's a deficit in my life where Kevin has noticed. Dad, you don't know how to do anything. Well, there's a reason for that, Kevin. It's just part of my life.
Well, that's where but like sometimes I'm like, I'm like, you got self-sufficiency sometimes, sometimes like there's some things that aren't going right, but he's gotten like, since we started social media, he knows how to do all that stuff himself now, like with making videos and editing, like doing some simple cuts and stuff versus he didn't even know how to like log on or what TikTok was or any of these.
Hey, so different generation too. Beyond that, I'll cut you some slack there. Different generation.
It is total different generation for sure.
It's a whole other ballgame. I was on the cusp. I was born in '89, so I was like, I got a little bit of the taste of nothing, but also grown up in the beginning of I feel like the real wave. So I like to think I got a best of both worlds. My sister's a little bit more. They were 82, 83. But yeah, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt there because there's a lot of things I barely know how to do.
What age did you get a phone at?
I think my mom gave me a flip phone in like 8th grade, maybe, and it was just a flip phone. Like it was a smartphone. I honestly don't remember.
I got one of those slide ones when I was in like 7th or 8th grade, and I thought that was the coolest. Like texting that you could flip it open and text people. But yeah,
I still love that. Part of me wants to go back to the flip phone because this freaking iPhone is like just so distracting. And I was like, if the day comes I have kids, I like the idea of giving them a flip phone early just to communicate, text, call, and that's it. And then that's a whole other conversation. The social media shit is a disaster. Is like really good, but a disaster.
But you guys realize, when I was in college, there were no cell phones, and when we were in residency, we get these huge phones because we were neurosurgery residents and we're on call and so we'd have these huge phones like this big, and we thought we were so cool because we had a phone. I mean, this new thing that came out, these cell phones, and no one has, like the normal person doesn't have these things, So now everybody has.
It's a blessing and a curse. Like, you can do, like, your phone, you have access to like all YouTube, Google, like, you have access to all this knowledge. You can literally have a business on your phone. I see these stories. It's crazy. But then also there's all the negative aspects to it. Like, there's these social media apps, like, are programmed just like a casino. They want to maximize how much time you spend on that. So it's like, it's a two-edged sword. You have so many cool things you can do on your phone, but also you can get sucked in of, like, doom scrolling, and that's just terrible for, like, I know for myself, if I need to go get some movement in or something, because it just clutters your brain. You don't feel as good.
Yeah, no, it's a double, and it's up to us as the individual, like, a responsibility to have that self-control, because, like, for instance, my comment section is a nightmare sometimes. I mean, a lot of times very positive, but whenever I post something that's more divisive meaning and more like the belief system, like when I talk about the other side and stuff like that, it is like, I have a clip right now with the Medium Mallory that I had on, and that's such a divisive conversation, not intentionally. It's just exploring beliefs about connecting to the other side and all that stuff. And it's just so fascinating to me how confident people are in the comment section. Because, again, I've heard this conversation before. It's like, in person, I guarantee you 99% of those people would not be saying what they're saying in the comment section because they're far apart from each other. So it's a totally different dynamic of communication, and people feel like they have this safeguard in between them, as opposed to, go back to Mike Tyson, you say it in front of the wrong person. You're not going to get this. You're not just going to get a dislike button. It's going to be something different. So it's like this communication level is so different that it could be great and positive to share information, have these dialogues, but it's also could potentially so mentally draining for so many people that don't have that understanding and ability to really, separate themselves from the online world, because it's as great as it is. I don't know. It's kind of scary for the developing minds.
It can be amazing, but that's something that 100% having to navigate. My mom, I think she's better right now, but that's something she wouldn't handle. There's people that would literally say, like, your son deserves to die. They'll put the nasty people online and stuff, or they'll just put the.
Well, when Brian died, we got so many things about we're the worst horrible parents. You raised the drunk and also, but me and my wife had to get off because you can't. These people, but they have no purpose in life but to do that.
But even just trying to educate people about alcohol, they're like, "Oh, stop trying to ruin the fun. Like, you're like, no one cares. Your son." Like, people. I mean, there is, for all the positive comments, there's all the negative. These have to. And there's people that fight in the comment section.
Yeah.
Like, literally, they'll go back and forth 50 comments. So a lot of times we'll try to read comments, respond to some, like messages, acknowledge people.
But you can't let people.
But you can't get too obsessed with the comment section, no matter what you can do. Especially there's no point of even engaging with the negative people, because I just like to think I have no idea where they're coming from. They probably have something that makes them react like that. But also, there's just people that, just because they're online, they're anonymous, they just will say things just to try to get a reaction. So it's not worth giving it to them.
Yeah, again, it was what Brian said about, it's kind of I think the people that are doing that, it's either, and this is not to be harsh, but if it sounds harsh, whatever, they're just either bored, they haven't found meaning in their life, and they have to put it on someone else and find some reason to create some sort of, oh, I did this, and leave a stamp. And it's like, if that's your choice to make someone else feel like shit, then,
Well, I think the sad thing is that people get silenced. So many people get silenced because of this. And if you have something good to say and it's meaningful, go ahead and say it, and you have to forget about what other people say if you believe in it, truly believe in it. But to get silenced from these people are just silencing you, and you're letting them silence you. And I think it's wrong, but it's hard for some people to get over those comments. You get them, we get them. I mean, you just have to let them go, and we don't answer them. I mean, rarely do I answer one. I mean, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I'm taking a different approach lately. I have fun talking shit, mostly amongst my friends, and now I'm at the point where I usually ignore the negative comments. Somebody make a sarcastic remark, I don't acknowledge it for the most part. But part of me is like, if someone really puts it out there, I'm starting to call them out a little bit more. I'm like, hey, you're putting your name down, you're comfortable with that, then I'm going to respond. And it's like, in defense of the people that they might be calling out, because sometimes I think people ignoring it is the best option, but sometimes I think I want to call them out because it's so absurd and just so.
And I've done that too. And the few times I've done that, the people will rescind and say, "I'm sorry, I didn't really mean it the way I said it." I mean, if you call them out, they often will rescind and say, "Well, I didn't mean."
Well, because obviously they're watching your content. They're watching, or they're listening or watching your content. Like, that's the funny part about
I
it.
know.
Why are you spending your time? There's people that will comment like on every single video, or like, and it's just like you see the same thing over and over and over again. It's like you're taking this much time, and you're just like, it's so weird.
All right, keep talking shit on my post. It's cool. You're helping my algorithm. You're giving me more traction for a post that you don't like. Like there was a post that someone sent me a comment and a message about really disliking my my new logo, something like that. And she was, I'm cool with criticism. I kind of posted it to test it out, see how people thought. And some people criticized it in a good way, like, oh, I don't like it, this or that. I was like, that's cool too. That's what I was curious about. And then another person would be like, take it down. I'm surprised with you. You're minimizing grief and completely seeing past my intent. Again, it goes back to Brian. So I know my intent behind it. A, this is my podcast. B, I'm not minimizing anything. There's an artsy reason, there's a meaning behind it. Anyway, and I made a video kind of calling out the comment as a joke, lip syncing a Billy Joel song. And I hit her name out of respect. I don't need to put her name out there. And I posted it. So she was anonymous. And then she responds to the comment section. I'm like, and then she yells at me for putting it out there. Like, first of all, I made you anonymous out of respect to you. I'm not trying to call you out like that. And you commented on it for everyone else to be aware that you were the one that said it. Like, I don't know what's going on here. Like, you're seeking attention.
No, I think it's great. When I saw you messaged the Instagram, like our Instagram account, I right away, because it's like, wow, it's so funny. You don't even know these things exist, because that's something we notice. It's just if we do a podcast, we talk about as a family grief. It relates to so many people. So many people are like, oh, I just didn't, it's like an outlet. So I was like, this is like right up with like what we do all the time. So I was like, this is awesome to see something like that. So it's funny. It's just so funny that some people will say, like, and like you said, it's all about your character and your intent behind things. No one else, people can say whatever they want, as long as you know your why and what you're doing. It doesn't really matter, because to me, I saw it. I thought the exact opposite as that person. I was like, oh, this person's trying to put this out there, a subject that's taboo. If only we had more stuff like that and it was more mainstream.
But just to talk about grief, while you had us on, I think for people out there, everybody handles grief differently. There's not a timeline on grief. I mean, you have to just take it at your own pace, and you can't let people tell you, well, you should be over it by now. Well, it's not for you to tell me when it's over. Some people can clear the loved one's clothes out in a year, and we let Brian's clothes sit in his room for 4 years or 5 years before he even touched them. And his book bag sat in that same exact spot when he came home that afternoon for a year. And so don't ever let somebody tell you there's a timeline on grief, and there's not. And then I think you can do two things with grief. I mean, you can let it consume you and downward spiral your life, or you can do something positive with it. And I think what Kevin and I have done in our family, but Kevin and I particularly, I mean, I did an Ironman because I wanted to challenge myself after Brian died in 2017. I did a full Ironman at age 52. Kevin's done an Ironman. He's done a 50-mile run. And then Kevin and I are taking a step more, because I think, we're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in September. And part of that is because of Brian. And I think for anyone out there who has grief, take your energy and use it for something positive, or something to challenge yourself to move yourself forward in life and inspire others. Because I'm telling you, people can be inspired by what you do, and we're finding that out, and it inspires yourself. But I mean, all the positive feedback you get, it's an ego thing maybe, but it also helps inspire us to want to do more. And I think grief can be used in such a good way that you never even thought about, instead of having to just say, I've lost someone and it's changed my life and my life will never be the same. And you can do so much more with it. And that would be my only advice to anybody listening to this podcast is, take your grief and use it for something that helps others. And it doesn't have to be what we did. You may like to do art, so start doing art and help people do art. Or we found so much with Brian's death about just being nice to people, and all the nice things that Brian did that I'll just tell you one more story and I'll be done. But when Brian's funeral, was a very big funeral because he was a young person, and people would wait 3 hours at the funeral home, and they would wait outside in the cold just to come in and talk to Cindy and I. And there was an elderly gentleman who came in, and he was the starter at the golf course that Brian's high school team would practice at. And this guy waited 3 hours to see us. We've never met him, don't know who he is. And he came up and he said, I just want to take a moment to tell you about your son. And he said, your son was one of the only people, if not the only person, that would ever talk to me when he came to practice. The other kids would just go about their business, would never say hi to me or really not interact with me. But your son would always come up and ask me about how was your day, became friends. And he said that meant something to me. And I wanted to let you guys know how your son impacted our life because of what he did each time he would go to practice. And I wanted you to know that. So here's a guy who took his time to come to our funeral, wait 3 hours, and tell us just that one thing. So that little thing, Brian will never know, how he impacted that guy. But we all do stuff like that and can do stuff like that, that you impact people every day that you don't even know about.
That's beautiful. That just shows you the little things. And again, like you mentioned, you can do whatever it may be, whether it's art, whether it's climbing. It doesn't have to be this big thing. It's just as little as a conversation with someone else. The way you live your life has this exponential effect on people that I feel like most of the time, high majority of the time, we have no idea. And it's because we're just going about our everyday things. Maybe some people are being polite, this or that, like your son was, and he was just doing it because of good nature. And that has an exponential effect. I think those little things that really change the world. Obviously, these big things that you guys are doing, it costs a massive net, but also people that aren't doing these on this paper huge things, those little things really are what makes a big difference, clearly.
I think it's what's so powerful is, especially now with social, it's just sharing your story. Like we all think we're so unique, but we're not. Like we are, but we aren't. Like your story is so much power because there's almost certainly someone out there that will listen to it and gain something from it or feel that comfort of knowing I'm not the only one going through this.
It validates them. It validates how you feel.
And I think that's what's important about your podcast, or like what I thought that's the biggest thing I think is just you put this stuff out there. There's all the other stuff out there. Someone will listen to one of these things and someone might say those are stupid ideas, and someone else might be like, that's exactly how I felt. And that's all you need to do. That's the entire reason we've always done stuff ever since Brian's death is if we can just help one person, think about how much of an impact that has, because there's such a chain reaction of positivity and a chain reaction of you. Just like that, my dad was saying, that's why it's not just your life. You positively have such an impact on your friends and family and those around you more than you'll ever know until, it's not shown, but that's something they would talk about. Once Brian was gone, they got to see all those things. They got to see all those things that someone actually living their life doesn't get to know because people don't openly speak about all these things. So, that's another thing is just, go out of your way, just hold the door open for someone or give someone a positive comment. I mean, it goes a super long way.
Amen. And I think, one thing as we close out this episode, I'm not going to tell you guys to write a review, but you guys should write a review on the podcast. I'm going to urge you guys to go find someone in your life and tell them now, because it's interesting when you tell that story of your son, how, he had that impact. Tell someone now while they're still alive how much of an impact they have. Show that gratefulness now, like you said. Make that nice comment. Or if someone does make a difference in your life now, tell them. Make sure they know now, and it's not something you guys make aware later. But either way, it's still beautiful. But I think that's the big point.
Well, it's so cliche. It's so cliche too, because people think tomorrow will be here, but for Brian, tomorrow wasn't there, right? He went to a party at 10:30 at night and he's gone. So you just don't know, tomorrow may not be there, and it's a true statement, even though it sounds so
no, it's real
cliche, but it's true.
It's cliche because it is true.
It's exactly. I always say it's cliche. I'm like, there's a reason it's cliche inherently, and it's like but it's true, and that's why it's freaking cliche. So I want to thank you guys for taking the time to speak with me. It's honestly a pleasure. This is a great experience for me personally, and I'm sure people that are listening to have a father-son dynamic. I think that's really powerful, and I hope to be able to do something again in the future, whether it's the podcast again or something of the sorts. But before we do get out of here, again, it's always the worst transition in history going from this conversation to what do you guys got going on, that if you want to share anything, let us know. As usual, I'll put all your information in the bio and the comments in the description. But if there's anything else you guys want to say before we get out of here, the mic's yours.
If you guys want to hear more, we talk about lots of different stuff. You can check us out on the Hefflinger podcast. And then you can follow my dad's social media accounts. It's just at Dr. Hefflinger. And there'll be links, I'm assuming. But thanks for having us on. It was great talking to you. I always enjoy conversations. It's refreshing to me because there's just a different level in conversations like this versus someone. It's hard to relate certain things or feel.
Yeah, exactly. And I always say is, when people say they lost someone, I get gravitated towards, because of obviously this podcast. Now I'm like this death guy, even though I'm just David. And they're like, they say so-and-so lost so-and-so, but you know what I mean? I'm like, not really. I have my experience, but I'm not you. And I'm not trying to say that to isolate them. Like, I'm giving them an opportunity. I'm just like, I feel for you. But at the same time, it's like, there's only so much I do know, because I don't know your experience. I understand there's a foundation of pain and grief there. That's the commonality, the camaraderie of it. but there is still, like we said, that individuality, and we're all just figuring it out. This whole life thing's weird. So we're gonna get out of here. But I was sometimes I think about. Sorry, I have these freaking rants. Apologize. We're still here, guys. Still here. When I think about how this is gonna sound ridiculous, I swear I didn't smoke weed before this episode. Whenever I think about the ridiculousness of life, I'm like, you ever think of an atom? Not Adam, an atom. I'm like, how ridiculous is the thought of an atom? Like everything else is just from that point on. It's like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what we're doing. Like, it's just, if that makes any sense, I'm just extrapolating, or it's just like, what is going on? An atom?
I just watched Oppenheimer, and it had me having dreams about atoms and all this. I was like, how do we figure all this out? And then life is just, I think the same thing. Well, I'm 26, and everyone's just figuring it out.
I think a great episode, you've probably already done it, but there's so much out there about consciousness. And does consciousness come from the electrical activity of your brain, or is there something more that that makes you conscious? And it's such a intriguing question because there's no answer to it. It's a belief, I think. But
sorry, I apologize. Go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I want to. Do you guys have like 5 more minutes? Is that possible? Like, we're gonna cut the episode. Thank you guys. I'm gonna say this and I want to do something on the back end real quick. But guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. As usual, I'm gonna put their links in below if you guys want to find these guys. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.